Everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking to a again, I'm a doctor. I just asked him about that. Rabbi Shlomo. He is an Imago therapist, but also he's a clinical counselor. So both. And what I wanted to talk to him about, what is Imago therapy and how does it help people and all that. But before we dive into those questions, Shlomo, Rabbi, can you share your history from where you started to how you got into Imago and what do you do now, kind of?
Sure. So I would say about 2 years into my marriage, we just had our first child, and things were getting to the point where we are experiencing some more and more conflict where I was just like, we need to go get help.
Mhm.
And I had a colleague of mine who recommended an Imago therapist, and my wife's hairdresser also recommended an Imago. So we thought it was a good sign that we should try Imago.
Mhm.
So we went to an Imago therapist, and at the time I'd wanted to be a pulpit rabbi. I was looking for a job, and I was getting my master's degree in counseling psychology.
Mm.
And we fell in love with Imago, and the therapist said, there's a training going on for a therapist to become a Imago therapist, and maybe you should try do it. And I said, yeah, this is great. This actually works.
Mhm.
A lot of therapy doesn't feel like it works. This actually works for us. So the rest was history, and I wound up doing that, and that became my kind of career path, helping couples. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've continued along the path. I've become an advanced clinician. My wife and I do the Imago workshop called the Getting Love You Want workshop. We're workshop presenters, and then I've also joined the faculty. So I'm a faculty associate with the Imago Institute, a training institute. So I'm training other therapists to become an Imago therapist as well.
Awesome. So let's dive into what is Imago therapy, right? For people who are not familiar with it, who don't understand, could you
Sure.
kind of share what is Imago therapy, how it works? I mean,
Sure.
I guess we don't have to go deep dive, but let's for the overall picture, big picture view.
Yeah. So Imago therapy is a modality of couples counseling.
Mhm.
And it basically, there's a theory behind why couples pick each other, why couples experience conflict, and then very practical skills, what they can do to get out of conflict and create a better relationship. And
Mhm.
I find the theory is quite fascinating because it helps couples see their relationship in a different way. It helps give them more hope. It helps them recommit. And just to briefly share, imago means image in Latin, and the idea is that we all have an unconscious image of our ideal partner. So that means that it's not random that you just fall in love with somebody and marry them. There's a reason why you're attracted to your spouse over everyone else. And that's because that person is your imago. And what that means is image, we all have an unconscious image of what we're looking for. So you could have a whole list of what you want in a partner. You can even say once you got married, wow, this is what I liked about you. But there's something else going on a deeper level, and that is this imago. So what is imago? The imago is a composite of the positive and negative characteristics of your primary caretakers, of your parents. So essentially, marriage is the unfinished business of childhood. You're actually looking for somebody you are attracted to recreate your childhood, someone who's going to remind you of that childhood experience and push your buttons. And so that is like it's almost like you have like an antenna. I'm like looking for this type of person, and that's who you find.
Mhm.
And what happens is, well, no one in their right mind would do that, even if they had an okay childhood. It's all happening on a subconscious level. And relationships start off completely unaware of this, and they often usually start off unaware of any challenges. Relationships start off typically, and we call that romantic stage, where everything seems perfect, where your brain is being flooded with neurochemicals, you're all doped up. You can't see the problems that lie ahead. Otherwise, you wouldn't get married. And then at some point after the commitment, after marriage, you go into what we call the power struggle. And the power struggle is when you start fighting with each other, you start becoming disillusioned, you start wondering, why did I get myself into this? This isn't the person who I thought I was marrying. Maybe somebody else would be better. Maybe it's time to call it quits. And that's where, unfortunately, most couples are. Half of couples in the United States get divorced in the power struggle. The other half, maybe a little less than half, stay together, but they're more like roommates instead of soulmates. They have almost like an invisible divorce. They're staying together for the kids or financially or because it's just easier, but they're not necessarily thriving. They're not necessarily feeling deeply connected. And what we say in Imago is this is normal. This is what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to have the romantic, it's supposed to go into the power struggle, but there's also another stage, and that's what most people are not aware of, and that's what we call the conscious marriage. The power struggle is not just a bad joke, bad luck. It's for the purpose of something more. And what that means is that we say that, as I said before, marriage is the unfinished business of childhood, and it's for the purpose of growth and healing. So that we're attracted to someone uniquely who's going to push our buttons so that we can actually become conscious of why it's bothering us and actually work through the issues together. So we find that the thing that we need most from our partner is the hardest for them to give. So for let's say, for example, my deep childhood need is to feel seen and heard. So I marry someone who in the romantic stage, maybe they were a good listener, but once they get married, they're nowhere to be found. They, anytime I want to sit down, they're just like, oh, do we have to talk again? And then it feels like you're being rewounded. But we don't realize that. We're just thinking, this is my partner just doesn't care about me. My partner's not a good listener. My partner doesn't love me. We're not realizing the connection between the past. And the connection between the past, the trigger is what makes it so much more painful. It's kind of pouring salt in an open wound. If I never felt heard in my life, and then I marry this person who I think is going to hear me, and then they don't hear me again either, I'm not making the connection that the pain is from the past. I'm just seeing the pain ahead of me. But when I become conscious about it and I realize, wait a minute, what's familiar about this? This reminds me of my mother or my father.
Mm.
Then my spouse is no longer the villain, number
Mm.
one. And number two, my spouse, if they can hear my story and my pain, they're much more likely to listen and have compassion and want to work on it. Because until now, they probably just heard me complain. Well, you don't listen to me, you don't care about me. So what's that going to do? Or I'm nagging all the time. Forget about it. I'm not even going to bother. But once they hear the pain, now I know why you keep complaining. Now I know why you feel like I don't like you, feel like you did as a child.
Mm.
The challenge is though, the person who has a hard time listening, they have their own childhood story why they have a hard time listening. So this is an opportunity for growth and healing. If the spouse who can't listen becomes a better listener, they help heal the spouse who needs to be heard, and they also grow as because they're becoming a better listener. So it's amazing to see how it works, and it's always fascinating. I had a couple I was working with. I did 2-day intensive with them the last 2 days, and they saw very clearly how the conflict goes all the way back to their childhood, and that it's really they said like we realize it's really my mother's fault. Again, we're not here to blame our parents, but the point is that people realize that we get so locked up in this power struggle, and it's my spouse is this horrible person, and when we understand what's going on for both people, it opens up everything. Then that's what creates what we call the conscious marriage. So that's like the high level overview of the theory. But you could see that it could take a couple who's very despondent, who doesn't have a lot of hope for the relationship, and to see that maybe we can understand this relationship differently. Maybe we don't need to be locked up in the power struggle.
Mm.
And I'll just pause right there before I go on and see if you have any questions about that.
No, so yeah,
Yeah.
no, excellent. You kind of started on the path of sharing an example. So that's what I was actually going to ask. One, the question is, hey, I guess the example you gave, maybe share a little bit more on how you help them through that. The other is people obviously can, I guess, when talking about, hey, we're stuck on your parents, when I've said that to people, they have that negative reaction. How do you walk through them through that to make them understand, kind of get them their mind around, or how do you discover essentially, or tips and tricks or whatever, in imago therapy, how does that process go? Again, obviously, you can go a lot of details, but kind of
Right.
maybe a brief description would be great for people to
Sure.
understand.
Yeah. So a lot of people, you can imagine some people, when you tell them about this, they say this just sounds very Freudian, I don't buy into this. And other people, they know right away this is like completely my childhood. So at least when I'm working with couples, we take it slow. It's a lot of psychoeducation in the beginning, especially since I have the luxury of working with couples in intensive. So I have them for 2 days. So it's not like I have 50 minutes and I have to cram everything in. So we spend a lot of time with theory. We spend a lot. I do a little guided imagery, help them remember growing up, and I talk to them about how this happens. And they actually do a written exercise where they write about their childhood, and then there's kind of like I don't like a Mad Lib where they like talk about who they're attracted to, and they plug in, I would say, they plug in some of the answers they gave from their childhood, and they read the story, and the story is really about their marriage, but the answers are all supplied from their childhood, and it reads pretty spot on. And that's when people just kind of have a big aha moment. So I don't try to, I'm not here to sell anything. I'm not here to convince them. They need to figure it out themselves, or I help them figure it out together, and they don't have to agree with it or not. But I would say most of the time, people, once they think enough about it, they realize it. And if it doesn't get help that way, sometimes when we're just dealing with the current issues, so we have a process through which we. One other point about Imago, which I think is very different than the other modalities out there, is that
Mhm.
it's a very structured session.
Mhm.
If you bring couples in and they start fighting like they do at home, you're going to get the same results. It's like Einstein's definition of insanity. So you have to change how they interact.
Mhm.
And our one of the most important things with the couples is that we need to have safety. That you have to feel safe with each other. You have to be able to open up and share and feel heard
Mhm.
without responding, without the person reacting. So we have something called the dialogue process, and that's what I have. I have the couples talking to each other. They're facing each other. They're not talking to me and complaining about each other. They're talking to each other, and one person has the floor, and the other person has to listen. They have to mirror back, which means they repeat back what the other says. They're not able to interject. And as I guide them through the process, they can hear each other. They can hear difficult issues. It's interesting. Like yesterday, somebody said, normally when we would have this discussion that we just had in 10, 15 minutes, it would take us like 2 or 3 hours because we would all keep blowing up at each other. And then we wouldn't talk to each other for a week afterwards. So here it's like you give one person the floor, they get to feel heard, they get to feel understood. And the person who's listening, because they're not busy defending themselves, they actually can hear the person for the first time ever and
Mhm.
start understanding at a deeper level. And then because they're both not in their reactive brain, they're able to access their problem solving skills and be able to figure out a way to change. So we're really focusing more on the process than the actual issues. If the couple can feel safe with each other, they can deal with any issue because every couple has issues, and you can't just say like we're gonna just fix the marriage, we're gonna fix this one issue, and everything will be good. Something else will come up next month, next year. We need to empower couples to interact in a different way. So this is what we're doing, and in that process, as we're talking about what's going on now, I inevitably lead them back to and what this reminds me of from my childhood, and then give them a moment to think about it. And usually it's like, oh, yeah, that's when I was a kid. This is the way that I was treated, and this is why I'm reacting. And then they share their story. So we get there, we either get there by starting from the childhood or we start from the present and go back and kind of see where it's coming from. And the purpose of the childhood is, again, it's to help you move forward. It's not to blame your parents. It's not to get stuck in analysis. It's there to get the information and take away as I said, the villainization of your partner
Mhm.
and to realize that everyone's trying to do their best and let's work together and create a better relationship.
Awesome. Well, so for people who don't know, could you kind of share where and how Imago therapy started and who kind of essentially kind of created this modality?
Sure. So it started, I don't know, 40 years ago. So with Dr. Harville Hendricks, he was a professor in he was teaching marriage and family therapy. He was also working with couples, and at the same time, he was getting divorced from his first wife. And he was sitting there like with his divorce papers and thinking, wait a minute, I have to teach a class tonight. I have to work with some couples tomorrow. How on the earth can I be helping people in a relationship when I don't even know how to help myself? So he made it his mission to determine why does the dream become the nightmare, the dream of romantic love, why does it turn into a nightmare? Why are relationships so difficult? And he spent his time researching that idea, and he met his current wife Helen, and together they co-created this Imago therapy. They wanted to understand why do couples fight, and then they actually begin to explore like why does anybody fight, and then why is there conflict at all? And it's kind of morphed from a couples modality to almost like a social movement that really can be used. I mean, we do it with with families, with people in businesses. You can do it with politicians to help people understand each other. And it's all about focusing on creating a safe space. And
Mm.
this is a very like I don't know, like a radical type of idea because psychology is typically all about the self. And
Mm.
even in whatever couples therapy there was before Imago, it wasn't really a couples modality. It was kind of just like an individual paradigm with two individuals and their two problems and figuring out some way for them to interact. Whereas Imago is not really focused so much on the individuals. It's, well, they're talking about their issues, but the focus more is on the process and on the space between. Because the space between is, we think about our earliest relationships with our parents and the anxiety that it could produce for a baby to not really have attuned parenting, not having a parent that really understands them or is consistently available and warm for them, and that anxiety that etches in the child's brain. And as we get older and we have that anxiety, relationships become something that's stressful. And to be able to help create a process that is calm, that helps regulate each other, that itself is what's healing from this process. It's not even about, it's not that we solve the issue. It's about healing the relationship so that they can feel safe with each other, they can feel love. And even in individual therapy, they say that what helps the most is it the modality? It's really actually the relationship with the clinician. And all the more so in a couple, if the couple the relationship that they have with each other is what will heal.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Awesome. Awesome. So in that sense, you said the clinician is important. So how do you recommend? Obviously, if they're near you, close to you, they can reach out to you. And by the way, I'll be, posting Shlomo's, information, his website, whatever information. And we'll be covering more of the stuff he'll be doing a little bit later, in the sense that he has some, extensive stuff he does, resorts and all that stuff. We went through. We will talk about it a bit later. But in the sense of general, okay, Rabbi Shlomo is not available. How do I find a good Imago therapist elsewhere if I can't, work with, if I can't, don't have the time, or perhaps, I don't know if you do online sessions or not, but if it's not possible to meet you, what is your recommendation on finding the right Imago therapist?
Sure. So, well, first of all, we do have online available, and we also
Perfect.
have clinicians on our team. So my practice is, I would say it's unique in that we don't see people, let's say if someone wants to come for one time, we don't do kind of like just the weekly one-off sessions. We do private retreats or group retreats.
Gotcha.
So we're working with couples for 2 days with follow-ups, or we do group workshops. But we have clinicians also who are part of our team who are certified Imago therapists. They've been vetted by our team. So we know that you're getting what you think you're getting. You're getting Imago. Because unfortunately, a lot of people, I mean, even people who have come to some of my continuing ed classes for like 3 hours, they might be on Psychology Today and say they do Imago therapy, and they don't really, I mean, they might be using some of the things they learned, but they're not an Imago therapist. So it's like you don't want to go to a brain surgeon, someone who's like says they're a brain surgeon who's just a general practitioner who took a class in surgery in med school. You want to go to somebody who has the training and the license and everything. So we have clinicians who work for us in various locations in the US, around the world. So if you want someone in person, you know, very likely we'll have someone close enough. And sometimes people do travel. And then we also have online options, people who can work with you online. Otherwise, you want to make sure somebody is a certified Imago therapist on the Imago website that, to vet and ask any questions that you have. Because a lot of people do, everyone who does a training in any modality doesn't mean that that's their specialty. But if this is a very unique process, so it's not that we don't, they're wonderful ideas in other modalities, and sometimes we can incorporate them, but in terms of the belief in the couple, the belief in healing, then not encouraging people to get divorced, really encouraging people to do the work together, teaching them the dialogue process, all the theory. If you want someone who's going to do that, who's going to be like a really a purist, I guess you could say, then you want to make sure that you're working with somebody who is certified and really does this exclusively.
Awesome. Great. Before we get into your whole programs, all the set of programs, one more question I have is, for couples looking for therapy, what do you say? Well, how do you kind of recommend people to come in? Or I guess delineate, is it too late, or, is this the right one fit for them? I mean, anyone, I mean, based on what I know about Imago, anybody having problems in their relationship want to mend it, probably should first try Imago. But that's beside my point. That's my personal opinion. Knowing a little bit about it, I wish I'd known it my case, but that's a lot, separate story. But with like, is there a point of no return where it probably not useful, or is that more okay? Come talk to us. Let's see if it's a fit, and then we can go from there. Kind of deal. Is that
Yeah.
how you
So the
recommend?
question, like, how do you know if who is this not for? So I would say if both couples are committed and want to make the relationship better, or even save the relationship that's falling apart, for sure it can be helpful. We can never guarantee results because it depends on the couple, and we find though that what we're offering is helpful. Now the challenge is when somebody is kind of is checked out, they're not interested in being in the relationship. So, miracles can happen, but it's definitely harder, but that would be the same for any therapy. I don't think any therapy is necessarily going to you could say that it's going to be helpful if one person doesn't want to be part of the relationship. And that's the challenge because if you want to make it work, then I would say the tools are good enough and it's a safe enough environment and it's not going to make even the delicate situations where people are very angry and there's been betrayal and all of that. If a person wants to make it work, we're not going to make it worse. Because a lot of therapy, unfortunately, even if somebody wants to save it, it can make it worse. And it'll maybe the therapist takes sides or villainizes one person. It's a big problem, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I feel safe to say that it can make it better. I find I work with couples even when they want to break up and have an amicable separation, amicable divorce, or get clarity if they should stay together. So, and it still can be extremely helpful and they can gain a lot as individuals and especially if they're parents. I always say you're going to be in a relationship no matter if you have parents, you're never going to be out of a relationship. You might be at like no longer married, but you're still going to be in a relationship. So you need to interact with each other, and it will definitely help people communicate better and hopefully not have the resentment and anger against their ex partner. So, I find it useful even in that case. Now,
Gotcha.
if there's a case where somebody is just like not willing to follow the protocol, where a person just doesn't want to follow what the therapist is asking them to do, and they just want to run the session, well, that's going to be a problem. But that will be with any
Right.
any modality, I think.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent because one of my experiences when, now I am, no longer in a relationship, but when it was suggested to me, the first thing that struck me before I knew about Imago, I mean, later read the book and
Yeah,
got Imago and understood it and actually recommended to someone close to me. And without even going to therapist, just the book and following those principles completely changed the relationship. So I know the effect of it, right? So, but that was my image. Like, hey, this guy or this girl or whoever the therapist is going to like just point fingers,
yeah.
say, hey, you're doing bad. So that was my whole thing. That's why I wanted people to understand, Imago is not that. It doesn't like, lend to the blaming or one person being the sole person to blame and all. All right. With that being said,
That's important because there are so many people that go to couples counseling. Unfortunately, a lot of people who work with couples are not trained. They just have a master's degree. They took a class in marriage and family therapy, which is not enough to equip you to be able to help a couple. And even people who've done trainings. I mean, you can get some modalities, you can get like a level one training, which is like, 14 hours and then it looks like you practice that modality. That's not, I mean, again, you wouldn't go brain surgery with someone who took a 2-day course in surgery. You want someone, so if you're a certified Imago therapist, you've gone through a whole rigorous program and it is about the relationship. It's not about blaming people. And unfortunately, a lot of people take sides and it's very destructive. Even relationships where aren't even so bad, they become they become worse.
there you go. Awesome. Yeah, that's exactly my point. That's the reason I wanted
Yeah,
somebody to come and share imago therapy for people who are not familiar. Okay, then let's get into your program and what all you do so people understand, what all you offer and they can obviously build share
sure.
website or whatever other information they can come and look at more information, but kind of share your programs and what all you do for couples.
Sure. So my wife and I, Rivka, we run the Marriage Restoration Project, and we primarily work with couples. I mean, occasionally we'll do work with businesses also. We do like trainings for businesses, help them with the communication in-house, and but we're working with couples in either a private setting or a group setting, doing a 2-day retreats. So usually we do a 2-day retreat in person or online, and then we do follow-ups afterwards. So it's an intensive immersion experience to really learn about these principles, to really work through a lot of the big issues. And people usually walk away in a much better place, much more hopeful. They have new skills, and we find that it's important to help support them afterwards. So we have follow-up sessions, 8 sessions included afterwards. So you have that weekly or as needed support going forward. Um, and we have, as I mentioned, we have these in various locations around the country and around the world. We also have group workshop. So we run a group workshop. It's called the Getting the Love You Want workshop. It's the official Imago workshop. They offer them all over the world. My wife and I do them together in Baltimore. We do usually 4 a year in Baltimore. And that's a more affordable way to get that immersion experience, to do the 2-day, get 2 days in a group setting. It's really powerful it's private enough that you don't have to share, but it's really powerful to feel like, okay, our situation is normal. Everyone's going through the same type of thing. And we also have, for people that want something a little bit more exotic, we have our colleagues work with us. They do in Costa Rica, usually once or twice a year, where the Getting Love You Want, it's extended over 4 or 5 days in Costa Rica. So you get a vacation and a lovely resort. And we also have an option to do it on a cruise.
Mm.
So those are our main offerings. And we also have other resources on our website. We have an online course if people want to kind of do a DIY. And then we have a lot of resources in our podcast too with information. And we're happy to speak with you. We have a free clarity call. You can register if you want to talk to us so we
Mm.
can learn more about your situation and point you in the right direction.
Awesome. There you go. Yeah. So that's a great, resource, for sure. Seems like, all right. So again, I'll be getting all the information and sharing that with the video and the clips I'll be sharing with Rabbi Shlomo's programs and all that stuff. Last question. I think I did miss it, right? You did mention it a couple of times, but I didn't get into it. But the important thing also for business owners, partnerships and all that stuff, imago therapy. That's another thing, right? Even if
Yes.
you're not a couple, that's an important thing. So, um,
But you don't even need to go to that. Like, we don't need to maybe you didn't have a maybe you did. I don't know, in the beginning of the company. But we have found that, and even if you don't want to share your childhood, but we have found just the communication skills, creating safety, learning how to validate somebody, it creates a much more healthy work environment. I mean, if you're working together as a couple, for sure, if you if we did not have these skills, my wife and I work on the business together. I'm the therapist, but she does the workshops with me and she does a lot of the marketing. But we do a lot of work together, and we could easily step on each other's toes if we didn't have these skills. So it's helpful. You'll be more successful in your business, but even in the business, helping people be able to work through differences, helping people be able to feel safer. We've done trainings for international corporations, and they've reported that they just feel like the environment's better. They're able to make more sales because they learn how to listen to people instead of just get defensive. So there are a lot of valuable skills that can be there even in the because this is really about being a human, learning how to really be present for another person. It's not something that and it's not something that we know innately. And I think that we all have our own baggage that gets in the way. So just becoming more self-aware and then learning some really practical skills can make a huge difference.
awesome. So yeah, that's a great important point. I almost missed it. So yeah, I mean, people who are listening, who are business owners, partnerships, people have issues with partners. That this might be something if you want to salvage it. Maybe, talk to Rabbi Shlomo and see, hey, if he can help you. So with that, last but not the least, so one tip you can share, it could be about Imago, it could be something else. One tip you can share with people that has helped you, maybe as both you and your wife, or just personally. What's the one tip you would like to share?
One tip. So, I mean, I give you something really practical. If you want to talk about something important, and maybe this sounds like really simple, but it's people don't do it. If you want to talk about something important, make sure it's a good time.
Uh,
Ask the other person if they're available.
Gotcha.
I like to talk to, instead of just like exploding or just like vomiting, you know, do you have a moment? Are you available? If not, when's a good time to talk? And just that question helps the person reorient themselves and be more present. I especially think today, because we're so distracted and we're on our phones and our computers and everything, we're like half listening and then we hear something and then we get defensive, and that's where a lot of escalation happens. But just by making that time to see if the other person's available allows them to be more present and to know that, okay, I'm here to listen to you, as opposed to just I'm on pins and needles and not sure exactly my next move. I
Got
think that can make conversations a lot more effective.
Awesome. That's a great tip. Yeah, yeah, definitely. People will get on the defensive if they're not ready to listen. So awesome tip. All right. Thank you, Rabbi Shlomo. And like I mentioned, I'll be posting all the information I have, so you can reach out to him. Like we mentioned at the last, we didn't get into too much of the business stuff, but really, the therapy sessions or workshops, I guess, would work for even a business, partnership. So reach out to him, see if it's a fit, so on, based on the information we share. And Rabbi Shlomo, again, really appreciate your time, taking the time.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yes,
It's
sir.
a pleasure being here.
Thank you, sir.